I listened to President Trump's speech today. It was an incredible speech. It was an outstanding speech. The liberal media either give it no play or downplay it, and it's too bad. And my buddies over at Conservative Review are correct. They wrote a piece over there, Jordan Schachtel, calling it Trump national security strategy is Reagan's third term, and it is. It is a muscular, yet prudential national security strategy. Therefore, it is quite different than Barack Obama's, which was oriented in appeasement and the surrender of American sovereignty and capitulation. And we pay a big price for something like that. But it really was an outstanding speech. I mean, I have to say, and I've been saying this now for a couple of months, if you're a Reagan conservative, or a constitutional conservative, or a traditional conservative, there's different phrases and labels given to the same thing. You have to be very, very pleased right now with the direction that President Trump is taking this country, or trying to take this country. You really do. You can disagree on particulars, you can disagree, and I do, on this tax stuff and so forth, but still, his first year has been highly successful, particularly when you consider the forces arrayed against him. People are attacking this man who would be celebrating this man if his name was Jeb Bush and he conducted himself the way Jeb Bush did. He is advancing the cause of liberty. He's advancing the cause of security. He's not a code pink Republican. He's not a isolationist. That's abundantly clear. On the other hand, he's not a radical interventionist of the Lindsey Graham sort. He's desperately trying to build up the United States military, but he can't do it on his own. He needs funding from Congress, but he's desperately trying to do it. He's confronting North Korea. It was dropped in his lap. He's confronting Iran and what Iran did on the Iran deal, and more on that in a little bit. He's taking on the Iran deal. He's trying to secure the borders the way he said he wanted to secure the borders, but the Democrat Party, the bureaucracy, and the courts are against him, not to mention some Republicans. And I think so many Americans are just pleased that he's not Barack Obama or a leftist, that they're out there shopping. Consumer spending is up. Unemployment is way down. Do you know our friends at CNS News have reported in the reporting now that black unemployment is the lowest in 17 years? Black unemployment under Donald Trump is far lower than it was under Barack Obama. Have you heard this on CNN? No, because CNN is not a news outlet. Have you heard this on MSNBC? No, because the IQ collectively is -7. The networks don't tell you about it. Black organizations don't tell you about it. The unemployment rate among blacks today is the lowest in 17 years. That's the truth. And so I look at this president, the substance of what he's doing, and I'm thankful that he was elected over Hillary Clinton. He even did something that all the prior presidents said they would do in the 70-year history of the modern state of Israel, and that is recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the embassy. And in order to move the embassy, you first have to recognize Jerusalem as the capital. Well, Donald Trump has done that. And even some of his ardent supporters didn't believe he would do that. I was very skeptical, and he did it. And still, you've got neoconservatives out there, among others, who are unappreciative or are appreciative only in passing. I just think there's so many people in the media, whether it's the big lib media that they call the mainstream media inaccurately, pseudo-conservative media, of which there's too much, or whatever it is, who are personally vested in Trump failing because they wrote so many columns or made so many speeches or attended so many panel events or think tank events or were on Fox, whatever, so thoroughly and completely against him, even up to the point of the general election. They wanted him to lose. They said they did. They voted for the third party guy who was some staffer on Capitol Hill. That for their own careers, their own egos, and their own mindset, they cannot give Trump a break, and they're not gonna. That's why they need to be dismissed. They need to be dismissed. I call them as I see them, as you know. Since this is the last show of the year, I'm just, summing things up. As I was for Cruz, strongly for Cruz throughout the Republican primaries. Not the early ones, I was still assessing, but jumped in early enough. And then come September, I endorsed Trump. And I think, when you put a couple of issues aside, Trump is the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan. I don't think there's any debate about that. I really don't. And if they'd send him a repeal Obamacare bill, he'd sign it in 2 seconds, which they won't do. If they would have sent him a tax bill that cuts tax rates across the board, he would have signed that too. But they're not sending him that. He's changing the face of the judiciary. Oh, I shouldn't say face because of the racists out there. Oh, what do you mean by that? He's changing the makeup of the judiciary. Obama tried to pull it to the radical left, and Trump is trying to pull it to constitutionalism. Again, these are big things, very big things. And I feel like Trump is becoming more conservative the more he's in office. I really do. I think he's seeing more and more things through the lens of liberty and limited government because he's having to deal with this entrenched bureaucracy. There's even a big piece in Bloomberg which acknowledges this. In Bloomberg, of all places, Washington bureaucrats are quietly working to undermine Trump's agenda, by Christopher Flavel and Benjamin Bain. December 18th, today, Bloomberg. If I have time, I'll get into that later, too. We know that's true. We have a permanent government. It's called the administrative state. And that was the whole goal of the progressives over 100 years ago. Elections are important from their perspective, but the purpose of an election is to keep building the permanent part of the government and to put as many judges as you can in to protect them from future elections. That's all written about in Rediscovering Americanism. But let's go back to Trump. He spoke today about his comprehensive national security strategy speech. And he also needed to do this because he's pushing for significant increases in defense spending, which are crucial. And his proposal is very similar to Reagan's in 87 and 88. And as CR points out, he borrows from the strategies implemented by President Reagan in his campaign to defeat the Soviet Union. And I did the same thing in my goal and my arguments to defeat what China's up to. An entire pillar of the Trump strategy is dedicated to preserving peace through strength, a phrase that Reagan used. This realist approach to foreign affairs recognizes that a dedication to ensuring American hegemony preserves stability and reduces the chance for conflict. Similar to Reagan, President Trump recognizes that ideological warfare is an essential component of the grand strategy. The Trump national security strategy promises to deny violent ideologies the space to take root, I'm quoting, includes combating the evil ideology of jihadists by exposing their falsehoods, promoting counter-narratives, and amplifying credible voices. Both Trump and Reagan, their policies, recognize the tools or elements of national power that America can use to challenge adversaries and support allies. Obama famously refused to recognize that there was an Islamic element to radical jihadist movements that were proliferating the globe during his tenure. Obama took pains to distance Islam from the ideology of terrorist organizations, once famously declaring that ISIS is not Islamic. President Trump refuses to take the politically correct approach. His national security strategy mentions radical Islamist ideology several times and details that their ideology calls for a worldwide Islamic caliphate in submission to Sharia law. And as many leftist outlets have already reported, the Trump plan drops climate change from threats to national security, promising to counter the anti-growth energy agenda that is detrimental to U.S. economic and energy security interests. I'm quoting from his plan. The Obama national security strategy claimed that climate change was one of the major threats facing the U.S. and world as a whole. President Trump first introduced the concept of principled realism in May, while delivering his first major foreign policy speech in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He said, "For our part, America is committed to adjusting our strategies to meet evolving threats and new facts. We will discard those strategies that haven't worked. We will apply new approaches informed by experience and judgment. We are adopting a principled realism rooted in common values and shared interests." Now, principled realism, folks, can be described as a combination of realism and pragmatism. It recognizes that sovereign nations will and should put their interests first. Principled realism announces a departure from the Bush and Obama era, which was linked to neoconservative and Wilsonian worldviews. Bush and Obama articulated more of a global standard for international relations. The Trump national security strategy claims to recognize the world for what it is, not for what it ought to be. Trump's national security strategy labels, in no particular order, North Korea, Iran, China, Russia, and radical jihadist groups as the chief threats to the United States, detailing the several ways these states seek to undermine America's standing in the world. On China, the national security strategy seeks to roll back China's criminal behavior against the U.S. The strategy calls out Beijing for stealing intellectual property valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. The strategy recognizes Russia as a nation that seeks to weaken U.S. influence in the world and divide us from our allies and partners. But it also remains open to cooperate across areas of mutual interest with both countries. North Korea is said to be ruled as a ruthless dictatorship without regard for human dignity. And the national security strategy states, warning Pyongyang's growing cyber, nuclear, and ballistic missile programs. It takes a no-holds-barred approach to discussing the destabilizing activities of Iran. It says the Iranian regime sponsors terrorism around the world. It is developing more capable ballistic missiles and has the potential to resume its work on nuclear weapons and could threaten the United States and our partners. It recognizes the threat posed, not just by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but all jihadi entities. And it goes on. It is an extremely substantive, comprehensive, thoughtful document, but even more, it's right on the money. It's right on the money. The president has laid out a successful, rational, thorough foreign policy agenda, national security agenda. The problem is we have a thoroughly irrational and in many respects contemptible opposition party that will try to undermine him, even if it means undermining the country.